Hey guys, if you're shopping for knives and gear, make sure you check out the description of the video you're watching right now for a link to my Amazon store where I've compiled some of the very best items available, including some of my own personal recommendations. Thanks! What's going on, YouTube? Metal Complex here, and today I've got another interesting knife review / knife overview to share with you guys. This is the Medford Knife and Tool Smooth Criminal Button Lock. Very interesting, very non-traditional Medford knife, and by that I mean, Medford Knife and Tool is known for doing the big hulking overbuilt titanium frame locks, and what we have here is actually an aluminum button lock. It's also much less expensive and in dimensions that are much more pocket friendly to today's knife user, knife enthusiast community. So this is really interesting. For anybody who doesn't know, I'm a huge fan of Medford knives, right? So keep that in mind while I'm doing the review. I'm gonna give you guys the facts, but my opinions and things are mixed in here. Thank you so much to @Abby_normal_1969 on Instagram. Please give them a follow. It's because of people like them that I'm able to bring you guys daily knife content. It's also because of my generous patrons, so thanks so much for supporting me during this time. If you'd like to get your hands on those stickers and some other exclusive benefits, there's a link down in the description. The support would mean the world to me. Let's go ahead and get a measurement on this guy. Oh, by the way, I'm a Blade HQ affiliate now, so there's a link down in the description where you can pick this up. And there'll be more Blade HQ links. So if you guys enjoy shopping there, you can use my links. Let's go ahead and get the full measurement here. We're coming in at 7 inches overall. Blade length is coming in at right at 3 inches, and the cutting edge is coming in at about 2.8. So for those of you who live in an area where it's illegal to carry a blade at 3 inches or more, this is right on the line. It'll probably be measured that way. Just keep that in mind. Let's go ahead and do some size comparisons up against the Ontario Rat Model 1. Rat 1 is coming in at 8.6 inches overall. So this isn't a small knife. It's still a big knife. We're going to talk about dimensions. It's just not nearly as long. So for, for newcomers, people who have not really, been looking at Medford knives and like, they seem a little bit big. This might be a little bit more attractive to you for a lot of reasons. And for people who have enjoyed the traditional overbuilt Medford styles, this is a much smaller knife, but it still has some of that Medford robustness that you might have come to enjoy. How about up against the Spyderco PM2? Spyderco PM2 is coming in at 8.3 inches overall. How about up against the Benchmade Griptilian, or in this case, the Ritter Hogue? Ritter Hogue is coming in at 8 inches overall. And last but not least, the one that is closest in size, the Spyderco Para 3. Spyderco Para 3 coming in just a little tiny bit longer at 7.25 inches, though. It's worth pointing out you actually have quite a bit more cutting edge on the Smooth Criminal here. How's the action on this guy? This is running on bearings, and it is absolutely, as is the case with most, plunge locks or button locks, it is extremely smooth. You can see here what I'm doing to flip it is absolutely 100% light switch. This does not have a heavy detent, so if you try to push button it, it's really not going to work. You really have to almost get a running start at that light switch flipper to get it to go. The flipper tab is a little bit small, and the detent is a little bit light, but you still can do it without wrist. It's very different from like the button lock Mordax, where the button lock or the detent is a little bit heavier, right? And the flipper tab is a little bit bigger. I probably would have preferred a little bit of a longer flipper tab and maybe a little bit of a stronger detent, but I can't fault it too much because, like I said, it's super smooth and I can get it without wrist. So I suppose, functionally there's not too much to complain about there. The other thing that I find impressive, normally I talk about this in a later part of the video, most button locks, most manual button locks that are not, automatic have a little bit of up and down or side to side blade play. And I've always assumed that it was simply a consequence of the locking system. But in true Medford fashion, I am so excited to tell you guys that this feels just as solid as every other Medford knife. I had always assumed that Medford's solidity not only came from the incredible tolerances, but the fact that there was so much surface contact between, like for example, some of the models with the enormous external stops, and of course the enormous lock bars, all that surface contact just did not allow the blade to move, right? And that is the case, but This, I think, is a testament to exactly how tight Medford's tolerances are and exactly how, how the level of quality that comes with, the machine work and everything that goes into these. This is absolutely solid. It's not going anywhere. This is great. And there's no stickiness in the button. It's very, very smooth. It's just, you really have to approach that flipper tab from the top and give it a good hard flip, but it does lock out and it is smooth. Absolutely. So I'm happy with that. Let's go ahead. Normally I would do the hardware check here, but as you can see, we do have what I'm going to call the proprietary hardware. I know the complaints, I want to be able to get into my knife, and the warranty paperwork says that I can't do that or they're going to avoid it. It's like I say in other Medford knife reviews, make an effort to go and watch the videos where Greg talks about this specifically. They don't want people to get in and mod it. I would love to be able to get into this knife, guys. I agree with you. I very much would like to just be able to take a T8 Torx and get into there when I want to, right? It's not going to be as simple with this guy. The warranty paperwork does make it sound like if you even attempt to take it apart, they're going to immediately void it. But Greg has talked about this specifically. He says it's a case-by-case basis. They line the paperwork out like that because they don't want people getting in and modding it and then not being able to get it back together, not being able to get it to function exactly the way that it did when they bought it brand new. And then they send it into Medford and they're like, oh, fix it. They're trying to prevent that. So case-by-case, if there's something wrong with your knife, contact Medford Knives. Don't listen to me. Contact Medford Knives and talk with them about it. So that's the case there. Now, the hardware is actually a pretty large hex head. So if you do have to make adjustments on the pocket, well, actually, the pocket clip is a smaller hex head. But if you do need to make adjustments on the body screws, you can do that. So that's fine. Yeah, so that's pretty much it for the hardware. Let's do carry profile here real quick. So thickness up against the Spyderco Para 3. It's just a little tiny bit thicker. This still has a very robust feel to it. It's nowhere near as thick as a lot of the other offerings from Medford Knives, but it's still robust, and it's only a little bit thicker than the Spyderco Para 3. Let's go ahead and do a blade stock thickness check here real quick. I'm going to say the blade stock's probably only about 125 thousandths or so. It is definitely not super. Okay, so it's 137 thousandths, so it's about the same. And that's probably not exactly right. It's probably either 135 or 140 thousandths. Greg's machines are probably correct and my calipers are probably incorrect, but it's very similar in blade stock thickness to the Spyderco Para 3. Up against the Spyderco Para 3 and PM2, two knives that have awkward carry profiles that nobody ever complains about. The benefit of having a super tiny, non-obtrusive flipper tab is that it's going to make virtually no difference in the pocket versus a knife that didn't, or versus this exact same knife that did not have a flipper tab, right? So you can see there in terms of height and in terms of overall length, it has both the PM2 and the Para 3B. This is not titanium. Now, I would have loved to see titanium on this thing, but it would have inevitably cost more money. And one of the biggest complaints with Medford knives is they cost too much money. I don't want to pay that much. That's the base of the complaint. It's not so much they cost too much money, and that's what you hear people say, but it's more so I don't want to pay that much for what I perceive, what I assume that I'm getting. Oftentimes, I mean, and everybody has their own opinions, everybody has their own thoughts, and has handled X amount of knives from whatever makers, right? Oftentimes, the people who have handled the $200 to $300, titanium frame lock flippers that are manufactured in China will look at something that is 100% made and checked and tuned and everything in the United States, and then they're like, "Well, I don't want to pay that much," So approach it how you will, think what you want. It is what it is, right? In any case, I kind of lost what I was talking about there. This is made out of aluminum, so the benefit here not only to yeah, that's what I was talking about. The benefit here to aluminum, and of course, the fact that there's no excess or unnecessary thickness in terms, of an EDC knife and a thin blade stock, it comes in at, wait a sec, we gotta change the units. Excuse me, grams, ounces, there we go. It comes in at a completely reasonable 3.77 ounces. We have a 3.7 ounce Medford that is in dimensions that are actually friendly to the pocket, actually, something that people can put in their pocket and EDC. That's fantastic. I do not have an issue with 3.7, 3.8 ounces at all. And you're getting a good amount of cutting edge, a very functional amount of cutting edge. So that's fantastic. Let's go ahead and talk about the anatomy here. So, I don't know if there are less processes in this knife overall than some of the more expensive Medford knives. I don't know if that's how they got the price down in combination with, you know, changing it to aluminum. There are a lot of knives out there that are hyper inexpensive that you can, you know, get in aluminum. It's not the material that dictates the price, right? It's how many processes, where it's made, blah, blah, blah. So I know people want to focus on that, but this is a Medford knife. It has Medford's fit and finish, which, you know, truthfully, yeah, their level of quality manufacturing and fit and finish is a step up from, you know, a lot of the other knives that we're seeing out there right now that are in titanium and S35VN or aluminum and S35VN. This is a very, very solid knife. It's a very high quality, you know, the build quality of this is very, very high, and I'm impressed with it. They say that they call it a green anodized aluminum, but truthfully, it looks more bronze. It looks kind of like just a battle hardened bronze. This is as far as I can tell, a hard coat type 3 anodizing, so it kind of has that chalky feel to it. It certainly is going to pick up, you know, snail trails and things like that over time. But on a knife like this, I mean, it's just going to add character. I mean, they kind of have this robust, sort of gritty look to them in the first place, and they are absolutely 100% made to be used. So that's really just going to add character to it. I don't have a problem with that. Every last corner, every last edge of this thing is nicely knocked down. There are no sharp edges anywhere, which has been the case. You know, in the past, I've reviewed older versions of Medford knives, and they were very angular. They could be sharp in certain places, especially, you know, on the titanium frame locks. The lock bar could be very unforgiving. And they've done a great job of changing that on a lot of models. And, you know, many variants of their frame locks that have been updated, it seems as though they've knocked those edges down, and that's great. This one, you don't have to worry about that because it's a button lock, right? So you're not having to disengage your frame lock. You just push a button, and it's very comfortable. It's super comfortable. In fact, ergonomics on this thing, just so you guys know, I can absolutely get a full 4-finger grip. And check this out. You can see here, they're not, you know, forcing you to put your hands. I mean, you still can move around a little bit, but here, 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 and then right there, that little spot for your pinky. It's super comfortable. This is a very comfortable small knife, and I'm happy with it. And you get right up behind the cutting edge. It's wonderful. There's also nothing in the cutting path, so you're able to make full use of that 2.8 inches of blade. You can see there, we have a very, very Medford-esque blade. I believe, let me check the box, because I'm not 100% always right about that. I believe those are hollow ground, but I'll let you guys take a look at the edge here. Oh, come on. There we go. Yeah, it looks to be that way. It just gets nice and thin behind the edge. I think there's a lot of assumption flying around that Medford knives in general are thick behind the edge. That's what you're going to hear. Where that probably comes from are, you know, the popularity that surrounded the Medford Praetorian tie, the big, monstrously thick one, and then probably specifically the Tanto variant that was ungodly thick behind the edge. And that's just a really, really cool knife. But, I mean, a lot of times that's where that comes from. Truthfully, my Praetorian tie at a 1/4 inch thick on the spine was hollow ground and came down to, you know, an impressively thin edge. Not a razor thin edge, but an impressively thin edge for how big the thing was. This is not anywhere near that same type of thing. This blade is 135 to 140 thousandths. Has a completely reasonable flat that carries out about 85% the length of the blade. And this does carry a lot of that thickness out to the tip, right? So there's plenty of strength here. But as soon as it starts to drop towards the cutting edge, it gets nice and thin down here. This is a wonderful EDC blade. It's very straightforward. It's very functional. There's not really anything crazy or special going on. This is going to perform exactly the way that it was intended. This is S35VN. I'll show you guys the box here real quick. Right there. So you can see exactly what the steel is. S35VN, that's great. I know a lot of people, you know, there's still people out there thinking that Medford only uses D2. Now they use D2, 3V, they use S35VN, S90V in some cases, and I'm sure the future will bring different steel types and things. S35VN, I think, is a completely appropriate choice. considering it is stainless, it holds an edge for a long time, and it is plenty tough. It's also Medford, and Medford has never been known for doing an improper heat treat. I trust their heat treat, I trust their process. They are completely open to their processes, exactly how things work. You can go to the Medford Knife and Tool YouTube channel, and there is a massive wealth of information and just openness about, you know, the processes and things. You can also go to their website and get a ton of information about, you know, everything that goes into this. And I think that's great. You know, you can think what you want about Greg Medford himself. My experience with Greg has always been positive. I don't do anything political on this channel, so I'm not going to say one side or the other where I'm at with that. But as far as my interactions with Greg Medford, have all been positive, and I have interacted with him specifically on multiple occasions. I also really like how open they are about everything that goes on in their shop and how they put their knives together. I think that's great. I urge you to check that out if you've never done so. It makes sense, you know, how these end up being executed this way. You know, it absolutely translates. Anyways, the hardware looks great. I love the little extra that they put into to making sure that the bevels are polished on the hardware. It is simple hardware, and yeah, it's frustrating you can't, you know, take the hardware out, but at least it looks nice. I also really like the lines here, right? The aesthetic lines flow, and they also, you know, that nice big scallop, it makes for a really comfortable position for your index finger. Much appreciated. The backspacer does have a little lanyard thing on it. I like how the backspacer looks. I'm not sure that I really care that the little loop is there. It's not really in the way of anything, and truthfully, my hand doesn't seem to really notice it. I mean, the edges are knocked down a little bit, so I mean, I don't know. I mean, I suppose you kind of notice it, but I wouldn't call it a hot spot by any means. I love the sort of iridescent, it kind of changes between blue and a charcoal look on the MKT USA on the pocket clip. I don't always like billboarding on knives, but, you know, in this case, it does kind of go along with the theme. This looks like a war tool, you know, and that's kind of their thing. And I appreciate the theme that's going on here. It says made in USA on the handle scale. I don't know. I mean, they probably... It depends on who you are. This is like just an opinionated thing. I would have just taken it on the blade, right underneath the serial number, you know. But the fact that it's on the handle, I mean, it's just one of those things that's neither here nor there. You know, that's just where it is. It absolutely is made in the United States. This knife doesn't carry deep, but it certainly doesn't carry shallow. That's all that's going to be sticking up out of your pocket, so I don't have a problem with that. The pocket clip has plenty of retention, and it's going to be real easy to get. My fingernail literally just was powderized against that coating. Those coatings are super hard, and that's generally what happens when you get a mark on them. It's very unlikely that something will actually scratch through the coating. Generally, if something rubs up against it, it's, you know, and there's a mark on it, it's whatever the material was being pulverized against that material. In this case, my fingernail just turned into dust. But yeah, the pocket clip is plenty edge retentive, or I'm sorry, not edge retentive, but there's plenty of spring tension there, and it's very easy to get in and out of the pocket. It's nothing special. It's nothing extravagant, and I imagine that that's one of the things that they did to help reduce the cost a little bit. Obviously, you know, to me, the idea here was, let's make a knife that has, you know, the fidget factor, the stuff that everybody wants, right? Let's make a knife that's a little smaller, a little lighter, a little more EDC friendly for, you know, more towards, they were catering more towards originally the 20%. The people who are, you know, either, I mean, you could argue enthusiast community, but in terms of users, people who are going to use their knives and they wanted a Medford knife, they were catering towards, you know, the 20% of people who are going out and really just beating the absolute tar out of their knives. And for anybody who's wondering, are Medford knives actually as tough as they present themselves to be? Yes, there's plenty of evidence online of people going out and actually using their knives. In fact, there's stuff on YouTube about it. So yeah, you know, that's the case there. Do a lot of people use their $800-900 knives, $1,000 knives? I don't, probably not, you know, but if you're wondering, can those knives actually, you know, stand up to it? Yeah, they can. But in this case, you know, they catered more towards the 80% of us, or the majority of us, who don't do stuff like that with our knives, who just want to carry a nice knife and just use it for regular stuff. And that's what they did here, you know, absolutely. Now, it is still a Medford knife, and it does still come in fairly pricey, especially versus the competition. This knife runs about $290. There are tons of knives out there you can get that are full production U.S. knives, right? Meaning there's no hands-on process. It's 100% machine made, and that does reduce the cost, right? You can get, for example, the ProTech button lock Mordax comes in something like 225-ish. Maybe is it all the way up at about 240? Those are 100% machine made. There's no hand process in them whatsoever. This is essentially, it's very similar. It is 6061 T6 aluminum with the Type 3 hardcoat anodizing on it, S35VN. It's a button lock. But I love the Mordax, but this knife is a little more solid. It just is. Like, everything about it is just a little more solid. I wish the flipping action was, I wish the detent was a little heavier, and I wish that the flipper tab was a little more prominent. But in terms of like your centering and your lockup and how all the pieces fit together, and just the overall appearance, I mean, they're tumbling and their satin finish. I mean, the execution of this thing is wonderful. You can see all the grind lines, but you can also see the tumble marks in the blade. This blade just looks wonderful. I've always loved Medford's tumbled blades. They're very aggressive, scratchy. I mean, it's like either do the micro grain structure tumbling where it's, like the Chris Reeve tumbling or the Taichung Taiwan on the Spyderco, or do like a heavy, aggressive, gnarly tumbling that's really going to hide scratches. And that's the case here. This knife will continue to build character over time, as all Medfords do. It's just going to look better the more that you use it. And the fact that it's really solid makes me happy. People who really want to EDC a button lock, but maybe throw it around every now and then, maybe actually, use it and beat on it. That's fantastic. By the way, check out the shouldering on this and the stop pin. Woo! Big old stop pin. Gigantic stop pin. I'll let you guys look at the lockup on that, that plunge lock there. Plenty of surface contact. I would imagine, it's a combination of the shouldering, surface contact on the big stop pin, and of course, the legendary fit and finish that is associated with a Medford knife that's allowing this thing to lock up so much more solidly than other button locks that I've experienced. So, can I recommend this knife? Truthfully, guys, I mean, here's my complaints with it. I wish I could get into it. I wish I could adjust it, but okay. I can't. It's the case with Medford knives. I wish that the flipper tab was just a little bit bigger, and I wish the detent was a little bit heavier, but again, I can't complain too much, guys, because I can absolutely light switch flip this guy without any wrist, so it can still be done. And then the $290 price tag doesn't blow me away. I would have been blown away at about $240, the same price as the Mordax. I was like, I can get a Medford knife for the same price as a a button lock Mordax from ProTech. I think $270 would have been spot on. $290 is a little high, but it's not crazy. And again, it allows people to get into a Medford knife for a good price. I mean, considering the process is what goes into these knives, it's real. No, I truthfully don't have that much of a problem with it. Again, I mean, it's like you could say that about anything. It's great, but it could be 20 bucks less. It could be 30 bucks less, right? Anybody who's wanting to get into Medford knives and you've been apprehensive because it seems like everything that they make is big and monstrous and crazy and thick, right, and heavy, here's your opportunity. And it's a button lock, so all that, the fidget factor thing is there, and it's absolutely drop shut. I mean, this is cool. Yeah, this is a cool knife. I can recommend it. It's going to go on my most recommended knives. Thanks again for, to at Abby_normal_at1969 for sending this guy towards me. If you enjoyed this video or at least found it entertaining, please leave a like. If you'd like to check out my other content, I do, of course, have lots of videos of knives that are either expensive or inexpensive that I do or don't like, so check those out. And if you enjoy all my content, go ahead and click on this metal complex logo right here and subscribe, because there's definitely more coming. Thanks again for watching, everybody, and have a great day.